The doctors gave Denise 3 months to live. That same week, her husband handed her divorce papers and used her chemotherapy fund to take his mistress on vacation to Bali. His mother told her to stop being such a burden and die quietly, but none of them noticed the unopened letter on Denise's hospital bed, the one that would change everything. Now see, Thanksgiving was supposed to be warm. It was supposed to smell like brown sugar and butter and cinnamon and everything good about being around people who love you. And in Gloria's house, that's exactly what it smelled like. The table was long and polished to a shine. The food was laid out beautiful, turkey carved thick, collard greens glistening in the pot, mac and cheese still bubbling from the oven. Every seat was filled with cousins and aunts and uncles and second cousins, once removed, who had been coming to this dinner for 20 years straight. Laughter bounced off the walls. Somebody's nephew was playing music from his phone in the kitchen. The whole house felt alive. But the warmth in that room was not meant for everybody. Denise sat near the end of the table, close to the kitchen door, like she had been placed there on purpose. And knowing Gloria, she probably had. Denise was thin now, thinner than she had ever been in her entire life. The chemotherapy had taken her hair 3 months ago, and she wore a soft lavender headscarf that she had tied that morning with shaking hands in the bathroom mirror. She had put on a little lipstick, too, a soft pink, just enough to make herself feel like she was still here, still present, still a woman with a place at the table. She smiled at the people around her. She complimented the food. She told Gloria the mac and cheese was the best she had ever made. And Gloria looked right through her like she was speaking to the wallpaper, like her voice didn't even register as a sound worth acknowledging. Craig sat at the other end of the table, right next to his mother, right where he always sat, laughing loud and leaning back in his chair, telling stories about some golf trip he took last month with his boys down in South Carolina. He didn't look at Denise once, not once the whole evening. Not when she arrived. Not when she sat down. Not when she almost knocked over her glass reaching for the bread because her hands had been trembling all day from the medication. His phone buzzed every few minutes, and he would smile down at it like a teenager with a secret, tap something quick with his thumbs, and then go right back to his conversation like nothing existed outside of that screen. Denise knew who was on the other end of those messages. She had known for a while now. She knew, and she said nothing because saying something would mean accepting that everything she had built her life around was already gone. Halfway through dinner, Gloria raised her glass. She clinked it with her butter knife, and the room got quiet. She said she wanted to make a toast. She looked around the table with that tight little smile she always wore when she was about to say something cruel dressed up in Sunday church clothes. She said she was thankful for her family. She said she was thankful for health. She looked directly at Denise when she said the word health, and she held the look just long enough for everybody to feel it. Then she said she was especially thankful for her son Craig, thankful that he was strong, thankful that he was thinking clearly about his future, about what he deserved, about the kind of life a man of his caliber was meant to live. She said a man like Craig needed a woman who could stand beside him, not one who was always lying down in some hospital bed. A few people shifted in their seats. One of the aunts, Aunt Vivian, looked over at Denise and then looked away fast, like she had accidentally seen something she wasn't supposed to see. Nobody said a word. The room just sat in it, marinating in the cruelty like it was part of the meal. Then Craig stood up. He put his napkin on the table slowly and cleared his throat. He said he had been doing a lot of thinking lately. He said the marriage had been difficult. He said these past 2 years had changed things between him and Denise, and he needed to be honest about that. He said he needed space. He needed room to breathe. He said he and Denise were going to be taking some time apart. That was the word he used, apart, like it was a mutual decision, like it was something they had discussed over coffee and agreed upon together, like he wasn't standing there in front of 30 people dismantling his sick wife's entire life while the stuffing was still warm on the plate. Gloria started clapping, slow at first, her rings catching the light, then louder, her chin lifted, her eyes bright. She looked around the table like she expected everyone to join in, like this was a celebration, like the cancer in Denise's body was an inconvenience they were all finally going to be free of. A couple of people gave weak nods, the ones who had always been scared of Gloria. Most of them just stared at their plates and said nothing. And Denise. Denise sat there with her hands folded in her lap, her chest so tight it felt like someone was pressing both palms flat against her ribs, and she did not cry. She did not speak. She did not scream or throw her plate or tell Craig about the messages she had seen on his phone at 3 a.m. She just looked at her hands and waited for the moment to pass the way she had learned to wait for everything to pass these days, quietly, invisibly, like a ghost who still had a heartbeat. She drove herself home that night. The apartment was cold and dark and too quiet. She didn't turn on the lights. She sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, still wearing her coat, still wearing the lipstick that had faded to almost nothing. She reached for the envelope on her nightstand, the sealed letter her grandmother Opal had given her years ago. The paper yellowed now, the edges soft and worn from being touched so many times but never opened. She held it in her hands and turned it over slowly. Her fingers found the edge of the seal. She could open it right now. She could find out what was inside. Whatever truth Opal had been keeping, whatever secret she had folded into this paper and sealed shut. Denise could know tonight, but something inside her said not yet, something that sounded like her grandmother's voice, soft and sure, the way it always was. She pressed the letter to her chest and closed her eyes and whispered into the dark, "Not yet, Grandma, not yet." Now to understand Denise, you got to go back, way back, to a small town in rural Georgia where the dirt roads didn't have street signs and the porch lights stayed on past midnight and everybody knew everybody's grandmother before they ever knew them. Denise was raised by a woman named Opal, her grandmother, a proud, quiet, elegant woman who had worked as a nurse in the county hospital for over 40 years. Opal wasn't loud. She wasn't the type to raise her voice or make a scene. She wore the same 3 good dresses to church on rotation and kept her house so clean you could eat off the kitchen floor and not think twice about it. But when Opal spoke, people listened. There was something in her voice, a weight, a warmth, a certainty that made you sit up straight even if you weren't planning to. Something that told you this woman had seen hard things and heavy things and survived them all and come out the other side with her dignity still firmly in place. Opal raised Denise alone after her daughter, Denise's mother, passed away from pneumonia when Denise was only 4 years old. She didn't talk about it much. The grief lived in her quietly, the way rivers run under rock, always moving but never making noise. She just made sure the girl was fed, clothed, educated, and loved. Every single day without exception. She braided Denise's hair every morning before school, and every night she sat beside her at the kitchen table checking homework, making sure every answer was correct and every letter was neat. She walked Denise to school when it rained, and picked her up when it was hot, and never once complained about any of it. Because to Opal, raising this child was not a burden. It was the most important thing she would ever do, and she taught Denise one rule above everything else. She used to say it while she was cooking, standing at the stove stirring something slow with a wooden spoon, the steam rising around her face, and she would look over her shoulder at little Denise sitting at the kitchen table with her chin in her hands, and she would say, "Be kind even when the world ain't kind to you. But baby girl, don't you ever mistake kindness for weakness. They are not the same thing, and the people who confuse them always learn the hard way." On Denise's 18th birthday, Opal sat her down at that same kitchen table, the one with the flower-patterned tablecloth that had been there since before Denise could remember. Opal slid a sealed envelope across the wood. It was thick, heavy, official-looking, with Denise's full name written on the front in Opal's careful, steady handwriting. Denise reached for it, and Opal put her hand on top of hers. Her skin was warm and dry and paper-thin. She looked at Denise with those deep brown eyes that held 60 years of living, and she said, "Don't open this until you need it the most. You'll know when. Trust me, baby, you will know." Denise carried that letter through everything. Through college at Clark Atlanta, through her first apartment in the city with the radiator that never worked right, through the day she met Craig at a friend's 4th of July barbecue, and he smiled at her like she was the only woman in the yard and told her she had the prettiest laugh he had ever heard. She carried it through the wedding, through the early years when things were sweet and Craig would hold her hand in public and bring her flowers on random Tuesdays just because. She carried it through the diagnosis when the doctor said the word cancer and the room went quiet and Craig squeezed her hand so tight she thought he might never let go. She carried it through the first round of chemo when she lost her hair and cried in the shower and Craig sat outside the bathroom door and told her she was still the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. She carried it through the slow, quiet shift when Craig stopped sitting outside the bathroom door. When he stopped calling her beautiful. When he stopped coming home before midnight. That letter sat on her nightstand through all of it, sealed and patient and waiting, like a promise that had not yet found its moment. Now back in the present. Denise walked into the hospital for her next chemo session. She signed in at the front desk the way she always did, quiet and polite, her insurance card and ID already in her hand. The receptionist looked at the computer screen for a long time. Too long. She clicked something, then clicked again, then looked up at Denise with that particular expression people wear when they have bad news, but wish somebody else was delivering it. She said the payment had been declined. She said the insurance policy had been canceled. She said she was very sorry, but they couldn't proceed with the treatment today. Denise stood perfectly still. The hospital lobby was busy around her, people walking past with clipboards, a phone ringing at the nurse's station, a child crying somewhere down the hall. The world kept moving the way the world always does when yours is falling apart. She reached into her purse and her fingers found the envelope again. The second touch. She pressed her thumb against the seal and held it there, feeling the old paper, feeling the weight of whatever was inside. She could open it now, right here in this sterile lobby with the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead and the receptionist looking at her with pity. But she didn't. She tucked the letter deeper into her purse, thanked the woman behind the desk, and walked out of those sliding glass doors into the bright afternoon sun. And she kept walking. She didn't know where she was going. She just kept walking. Now, while Denise was losing everything, Craig was building himself a brand new life, and he was building it with her money. He moved Rochelle into a luxury condo downtown, 2 bedrooms, hardwood floors, floor-to-ceiling windows with a view of the city skyline that looked like something out of a movie. The rent on that place cost more per month than Denise's entire chemotherapy cycle. Craig paid the security deposit and the first 3 months up front with money from the joint savings account, the one that was supposed to cover Denise's medical bills, the one they had built together over 8 years of marriage. Dollar by dollar, deposit by deposit, he emptied it without flinching. Like those years of sacrifice meant nothing. Like the woman who was fighting for her life with the help of that money was already gone. Like she was already dead and just hadn't gotten the memo yet. Rochelle was everything Denise was not, and she wore it loud. She was bold where Denise was gentle. She was flashy where Denise was quiet. She posted every single moment of her new life on social media, like she was running a commercial for somebody else's destroyed marriage. She posted photos from Bali, Craig grinning by the infinity pool, Rochelle in a white swimsuit with a cocktail in her hand. matching bathrobes hanging in the suite with Craig's initials embroidered on the pocket. She posted a close-up of the diamond necklace Craig had given her for her birthday. It was $4,000, the light bouncing off every stone, and the caption said, "He knows how to treat a queen." That necklace was purchased the same week Denise's chemotherapy was canceled because nobody paid the bill. And the thing that hurt worst wasn't even the money. It was the way Rochelle used it publicly. She tagged Craig in every post. She responded to comments from strangers saying, "Couple goals," and "You deserve this king," with heart emojis and kissy faces. Every notification that crossed Denise's phone screen before she finally deleted the app was another small knife. She would be lying in bed at night, too sick to eat, too tired to stand, scrolling through her phone looking for a distraction from the nausea, and there it was. Rochelle in Craig's arms on a beach that Denise's money paid for. It was cruelty wrapped in hashtags. And Craig didn't just leave. He didn't just disappear. He rewrote the entire story. He told his friends that Denise had changed. He said she was negative, depressing, difficult to be around. He said she had let herself go, like cancer was a lifestyle choice she made because she stopped caring. He told his boys at the barbershop that he tried his best, but a man can only take so much. Rochelle backed every word. She told Craig that Denise was playing the victim, that she was weaponizing her illness to manipulate him into staying, that he was too good a man to be trapped like that. And Craig believed all of it. He believed it because believing a comfortable lie was easier than facing the truth that he was the kind of man who abandoned his wife while she was dying. Gloria came to visit Denise one Tuesday afternoon. She didn't call ahead. She didn't knock. She just let herself into the apartment with the spare key Craig must have given her. She stood in the middle of Denise's small living room, looking around at the bare walls and the second-hand furniture and the pill bottles lined up on the kitchen counter. She wrinkled her nose like she could smell something rotten. Then she sat down on the couch, crossed her legs, and said what she came to say. She told Denise to sign the divorce papers. She said Craig had been more than patient. She said Denise was selfish for holding on to a marriage that was already over. And then she leaned forward, looked Denise dead in the eyes, and said, "Honey, you're dying anyway. At least have the decency to let my son live his life." Denise didn't respond. She sat in the chair across from Gloria, holding a cup of tea that had gone cold 30 minutes ago, and she let the words wash over her like dirty water. Gloria stood up, smoothed her skirt, and walked out without saying goodbye. Now there was one person in this whole mess who actually saw Denise. Not the version of her that Craig was selling to the world. Not the burden Gloria talked about. The real Denise. And that person was Dr. Elaine Porter. Dr. Porter was Denise's oncologist. A tall, elegant, brilliant black woman with silver at her temples and a calm in her voice that made you believe everything was going to be all right, even when the numbers on the chart said otherwise. She had been treating Denise for over a year. She noticed when the insurance was canceled. She noticed the weight loss getting worse. She noticed the way Denise came to every single appointment alone, always with that same quiet smile that was working so hard to hide how completely and totally broken she was underneath. Dr. Porter pulled some strings. She made phone calls and filled out paperwork and called in favors from colleagues she hadn't spoken to in years. She got Denise enrolled in a hospital hardship fund, a temporary program that would cover her chemo sessions while they figured out a longer-term plan. She sat Denise down in her office, looked her in the eye, and said, "I can keep you alive, Denise. The medicine is working, but this fund won't last forever. We need to find something more permanent." Denise nodded and thanked her. She said she would figure something out. But when she walked out of that office and into the hallway, she stood there for a full minute staring at the floor because she had no idea what she was going to figure out. No savings, no insurance, no husband, no family who cared enough to call, just a body full of chemicals fighting for its life. And a sealed letter from a dead woman that she still couldn't bring herself to open. She hit bottom on a Tuesday night in November. It was raining hard, the kind of rain that sounds personal, like the sky is angry at something specific. She was alone in the chemo room, sitting in the big beige recliner with the IV dripping slow into the vein on the back of her hand. The room was empty. No other patients that night, no visitors, no phone calls, no flowers on the little table beside her chair, just the hum of the machines and the quiet drip of the medicine and the rain hitting the window like it was trying to get in. She looked at the empty chair beside her, the one where Craig used to sit during her first treatments. He would hold her hand and rub small circles on her knuckle with his thumb and tell her they were going to beat this together. He would bring her peppermint tea in a thermos because she said it settled her stomach. He would stay until the session was over, drive her home, tuck her into bed, and kiss her forehead before turning off the light. That felt like it happened to someone else now, some other woman in some other life. She reached into her purse. The letter was there, the third touch. She held it in both hands, and her fingers traced the seal slowly. She could tear it open right now under these cold hospital lights, with nobody watching and nobody caring. But something held her back. Maybe it was fear, maybe it was faith. Maybe it was the ghost of Opal sitting in that empty chair beside her, whispering, "Not yet, baby, almost, but not yet." She put the letter back. She closed her eyes. She let the medicine drip. The nurses changed shifts around 10 o'clock. The new nurse, a young woman with kind eyes, came in to check her vitals. She looked at Denise sitting there alone in that big empty room, and she paused. She asked if there was anyone she could call. Denise shook her head and smiled that quiet smile and said she was fine. The nurse didn't believe her, but she nodded and dimmed the lights and closed the door gently behind her. Denise sat in the dark, listening to the rain and the drip of the IV and the low hum of machines keeping her alive. And she made a decision in that moment. She didn't know what was in that letter. She didn't know what Opal had left her, but she decided that whatever came next, whether it was healing or whether it was the end, she would face it standing up. She would not let the people who abandoned her be the last chapter of her story. She would not let Craig and Gloria and Rochelle be the thing she was remembered for. She would not die as the woman nobody wanted. She would live as the woman nobody saw coming. Outside the hospital, the rain kept falling, and nobody came. 3 weeks later, something shifted. It was small at first, like the first crack of light under a door that had been shut for a very long time. Dr. Porter called Denise into her office. She was smiling, which was unusual because Dr. Porter was careful with her expressions, careful not to give hope too early or too carelessly. But today she was smiling. She said the latest scans showed significant improvement. The tumors were shrinking. The cancer was responding to the treatment in ways that exceeded every projection. She said, "Your body is fighting back, Denise. You are stronger than any of us knew." But then her expression shifted. She got serious. She said the hardship fund was running out. 2 more cycles, maybe 3 at best. After that, there would be no more coverage. Unless something changed, the treatment would stop. Denise walked back to her room, carrying that news in both hands. Hope in one, fear in the other. She sat on the edge of the bed and stared out the window at the gray sky and tried to imagine a future that didn't end in a dark room with nobody standing beside her. That's when the door opened. An elderly man stepped in. He was tall and thin, dressed in a dark suit that fit him like it had been made for his body alone. He carried a leather briefcase that looked older than he was, cracked and worn at the edges. He moved slowly, deliberately, like a man who understood the gravity of every step he took. He introduced himself as Walter Graves, attorney at law. He said he had been searching for Denise for nearly 2 years. He said her grandmother Opal had left something for her, something much larger than she could possibly imagine. Denise looked at him, then her eyes moved to the nightstand where the sealed letter sat. Walter followed her gaze and nodded slowly like he recognized an old friend. He said, "I see she gave you the letter." Denise nodded. He said, "Have you opened it?" She shook her head. Walter lowered himself into the chair beside her bed, rested the briefcase on his lap, and looked at her with steady, patient eyes. He said, "I think it's time, Denise." Her hands were trembling when she picked up the envelope. She slid her finger under the seal, careful and slow, like she was afraid of breaking something precious. Inside was a single sheet of paper, covered in Opal's handwriting. That steady, careful script that Denise would recognize anywhere. And beneath it, a thick legal document with stamps and signatures and language that looked like it belonged in a courtroom. The note read, "Baby girl, I wasn't just a nurse. I helped build something. It started small in a church basement with 3 women and a dream. And now it's yours. Use it to heal, Denise, not just yourself. Heal everyone." Walter told her the rest. Opal had been one of 3 original founding partners of the Carter Graves Cancer Research Institute. Back in 1963, when nobody in America was funding cancer research in Black communities, 3 women decided to do it themselves. Opal, a nurse, a doctor named Lucille Carter, and Walter's own mother, Bernice Graves. They pooled their savings. They wrote grant proposals on napkins. They knocked on every door that would open and some that wouldn't. They started a clinic in the basement of the First Baptist Church on Maple Street with 2 examination tables and a filing cabinet. That clinic grew into a research center. The research center grew into a hospital. The hospital grew into a network. And now, 60 years later, the Carter Graves Cancer Research Institute was one of the largest private cancer research organizations in the entire country, valued at $17 billion. Opal's shares, a significant founding stake, had been held in a blind trust for decades, managed quietly by Walter's firm. The trust was structured to transfer automatically to Opal's sole living descendant upon her passing, every share, every asset. Every building with the Carter Graves name carved above the door, all of it now belonged to the woman sitting in a hospital bed, in a lavender headscarf with an IV in her arm, and a world that had decided she was worthless. Denise read the note again, then a third time. Then she pressed it to her chest, the way she used to press the sealed envelope, and she cried. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet tears tracing lines down her thin face, one after another, steady and sure, like rain on a window that had been dry too long. Walter sat beside her in respectful silence. He didn't touch her. He didn't speak. Some moments don't need words. They just need someone to witness them. 6 weeks later, the Carter Graves Cancer Research Institute hosted its annual fundraising gala. It was the crown jewel of the medical philanthropy calendar. Black tie, 500 guests, senators and surgeons and Fortune 500 executives, and socialites gathered in a grand ballroom decorated with white orchids and long ivory candles and soft golden light that made everything feel like a dream. Craig was there. Rochelle had pulled some strings through a socialite she followed on Instagram, and somehow they had gotten their names on the guest list. Craig wore a rented tuxedo that didn't quite fit right in the shoulders. He walked through that ballroom like he owned it, shaking hands with strangers, laughing too loud at jokes that weren't funny, dropping his name like it meant something to people who had never heard it before. Rochelle glided beside him in a tight red dress and the diamond necklace, that $4,000 diamond necklace, catching the light with every step. Gloria was there too, naturally. She had invited herself the moment she heard Craig was going. She sat at a corner table near the bar with a glass of white wine, watching the room the way she always watched rooms, calculating who was worth knowing and who was beneath her attention. None of them knew. The MC stepped to the podium. The room settled. Conversations faded. Glasses were set down. He said the Institute was entering a historic new chapter. He said a transfer of leadership had taken place that would define the organization for generations to come. He said he was deeply honored to introduce the new majority owner and chairwoman of the Carter Graves Cancer Research Institute. The doors at the back of the ballroom opened, and Denise walked in. She was not the same woman they had thrown away. She wore a simple, elegant black dress with no jewelry except a thin gold chain that had belonged to Opal. Her hair was coming back in short, soft curls close to her head. Her skin was glowing. Her shoulders were back. Her chin was raised. She walked toward that podium like every step she had ever taken in her life had been leading to this one room, this one moment. She didn't rush. She didn't look for familiar faces in the crowd. She just walked, and the sound of her heels on that marble floor echoed through the silence like a heartbeat. Craig's champagne glass stopped halfway to his mouth. His face lost every shade of color it had ever carried. Rochelle grabbed his arm and whispered something frantic, but he couldn't hear her. He couldn't hear anything except the blood rushing in his own ears. Across the room, Gloria's wine glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the marble. The red wine spread across the white floor like something bleeding. Nobody looked. Every single eye in that room was on Denise. She reached the podium. She adjusted the microphone. She looked out at 500 faces looking back at her. She paused. The silence pressed against the walls like a held breath. Then she spoke. She said she wanted to tell them about a woman named Opal who grew up in rural Georgia with nothing but a nursing degree and a belief that every human being deserved a chance to survive. She told them about the church basement clinic, about the 3 women who refused to accept that cancer got to decide who lived and who died based on the color of their skin or the size of their bank account. She told them about 60 years of quiet, stubborn, beautiful work that had grown into the very building they were standing in tonight. Then she said, "My grandmother taught me something I want to share with all of you tonight." She said kindness is not weakness. She said the people who try to break you are never the people who get to define you. She said sometimes the thing you've been carrying your whole life, the thing you've been too afraid to open, is the very thing that sets you free. She paused and let those words settle over the room like a blanket. Then she said, "Opal carried this dream for 60 years. She carried it in silence. She carried it in sacrifice, and she trusted me to carry it forward. That is exactly what I intend to do." She announced that the Institute would be launching a new program, free chemotherapy access for women abandoned by their families during cancer treatment. It would be called the Opal Fund, and it would ensure that no woman ever had to sit in a hospital chair alone, wondering if a single person on this earth cared whether she lived or died. The room erupted, 500 people on their feet. The applause shook the chandeliers and rattled the silverware on the tables. Dr. Elaine Porter stood near the back of the room with both hands over her mouth and tears running down her face, clapping until her palms stung. And through all of it, Denise never once looked at Craig. She never said his name. She never pointed at Rochelle or glanced at Gloria. She gave them nothing, and that nothing, that perfect, deliberate silence, was the loudest thing anyone in that room had ever heard. It sat on Craig's chest like a boulder, and it did not move. The fallout was swift, and it was total. Rochelle vanished within 48 hours. The second she realized the real power, the real name, the real money in that ballroom had always belonged to the woman Craig threw away, she was gone. No goodbye, no explanation, just an empty closet in the downtown condo and a disconnected phone number. She disappeared the same way she arrived, following whoever had the most to offer and leaving the moment the balance shifted. Craig tried to reach Denise. He called her phone. The number was changed. He drove to the Carter Graves Institute and walked up the front steps and asked to see his wife. Two security guards met him at the glass doors. They said Mrs. Denise was unavailable. Craig said he was her husband. They said her instructions were very clear. He stood on those steps for a long time, staring up at the building his wife now owned, and he could not form a single sentence. He tried Dr. Porter's office. He begged the receptionist to pass along a message. Dr. Porter picked up the phone herself. She listened to Craig fumble through his words, all those excuses wearing the costume of apology, and when he was done, she said one sentence. "She's busy saving lives, Craig, something you never once cared to do." Then the line went dead. Gloria's reckoning came from the family group chat. Someone, nobody ever admitted who, leaked screenshots of every message Gloria had sent over the past year. Messages calling Denise dead weight. Messages telling Craig to move on before the funeral starts. Messages laughing about how Denise couldn't even afford her own medicine. Those screenshots spread through the family, then through the church, then through every corner of the community that Gloria had spent decades building her reputation in. She tried to explain. She called people. She showed up at the church early on Sunday morning to claim her seat in the second pew. But the women who used to sit beside her had already filled the row. There was no room, and nobody moved to make any. Craig sold the condo. He couldn't afford it without the savings he had already burned through. He moved into a studio apartment on the other side of the city. No furniture except a mattress and a folding chair. No wife, no mistress, no mother who was willing to be seen with him. One night, about 3 weeks after the gala, Craig was sitting in that studio apartment in the dark, still wearing the clothes he had worn 2 days straight. His phone was in his hand, but there was nobody left to call. He scrolled through Rochelle's old posts, the Bali photos, the necklace close-up, the matching robes, and every single image had been deleted. Her whole account was gone, like she had never existed, like none of it was ever real. And maybe it never was. Maybe the only thing that was ever real in Craig's life was the woman he watched walk to a podium and change the world without even glancing in his direction. He thought about the Thanksgiving dinner, about standing up at that table and announcing he needed space while his dying wife sat at the end of the table in a headscarf. He thought about the insurance he canceled, the savings he emptied, the chemo bills he refused to pay so he could buy a diamond necklace for a woman who left him the second the wind changed. And for the first time in his life, Craig sat in the silence he had built for himself. Just 4 walls and the sound of his own breathing and the slow, crushing, permanent understanding that the most valuable thing he had ever held in his life was a woman's love, and he had thrown it in the garbage while she was fighting to survive. Months passed. The leaves turned. The air got cool. The world kept spinning the way it always does. Denise stood at the window of her new office on the top floor of the Carter Graves Cancer Research Institute. The city spread out below her in every direction, all glass and steel and movement and life. On her desk sat 2 things: the framed letter from Opal, the handwriting faded but still sharp enough to read every beautiful word, and beside it, a black and white photograph of her grandmother as a young woman, standing in front of the First Baptist Church Clinic in a white nurse's uniform, her smile so wide it looked like it could light up the whole state of Georgia. The Opal Fund launched that spring. 17 women enrolled in the first month. By summer, it was 63. By fall, the program had expanded to 3 more cities, and the waiting list was still growing every single week. Denise went to the hospital every week, not as a patient anymore, but as a presence. She sat with the women during their treatments. She brought them peppermint tea the same way Craig used to bring it to her, back when he still cared, because she remembered how much that small kindness had meant. She held their hands when the medicine made them sick. She told them about Opal and the church basement and the 3 women who refused to let the world decide who was worth saving. She told them they mattered. She told them they were seen. She told them they were not invisible, and she meant every single word with every piece of her heart. Dr. Elaine Porter accepted the position of medical director for the Opal Fund. She said it was the proudest accomplishment of her entire career. On some evenings after the clinic closed, she and Denise would sit together in the empty waiting room, drinking tea and talking about everything and nothing, the way people do when they have walked through fire together and come out on the other side, still breathing. Denise never spoke about Craig in public. She never gave interviews about the betrayal. She never posted a single word on social media about what he did or what Gloria said or where Rochelle went. She simply removed him from her life the way you erase a pencil mark from a clean page, gently, thoroughly, and without anger. Some people called her too kind, but the people who really understood her knew the truth. Denise was not being kind to Craig. She was being kind to herself. She was refusing to carry his weight for one more second of her life. Late one evening in October, after everyone had gone home, Denise sat alone in her office. The city lights blinked and hummed outside the window. She picked up Opal's letter and read it one final time. Use it to heal, Denise, not just yourself. Heal everyone. She placed it back on the desk, leaned back in her chair, and smiled. Not a big smile, not a performance for anybody, just a quiet, private, real smile that belonged to her and Opal, and nobody else in this entire world. She was not angry. She was not bitter. She was not defined by the people who had tried to bury her. She was free. Free in a way that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with knowing exactly who she was and exactly what she was worth. Denise didn't survive because she fought back. She survived because she stayed soft in a world that tried to make her hard. And when the truth finally came, she didn't use it for revenge. She used it for healing, not just hers, but for every woman who was ever told she wasn't worth saving. If this story touched something inside your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe to this channel because we tell stories that the world tries to keep quiet. Hit that bell, and I'll see you in the next one.